Well, good evening. Welcome to class number 5 of our CSE Class 104. I apologize for my voice. I was preaching in Pennsylvania this week and I overdid it or something. Can't talk very well. We'll try to get this out as well as possible, so listen carefully. We left off talking about the flood in the days of Noah in Genesis chapter 8, verse number 1. It has a very interesting verse. It tells us the waters assuaged. During the flood, all sorts of things were formed. The natural gas was formed. The coal formation would have come in during the flood and because of the flood. Down near the South Pole, it's interesting. If you read, you look at National Geographic map of the South Pole, it says they found anthracite coal near the South Pole. And leaves and all sorts of things found. Well, there's no plants growing on Antarctica, so how do you get coal at the South Pole? One explanation is the South Pole used to be up near the equator. I think that's a lousy explanation, but that's the one that's in the textbooks. The other explanation is the whole Earth used to have a more tropical paradise. Stuff lived everywhere. And the continents today is a pure coincidence based upon the water level. If you raise or lower the water, everything changes. And what it was like before the flood, there's absolutely no way to tell, as far as I can figure out. Garden of Eden could have been right here in Pensacola, Florida. Right now it might be under 500 feet of mud. Some people have argued, oh, well, the river Euphrates is mentioned in the Bible as being in the Garden of Eden. That's true. And the river Euphrates is in Baghdad. Well, this river Euphrates is. It doesn't mean it's the same thing. People got off the ark and they probably said, wow, that looks like that river we had before the flood. And they named it the same thing. Just like people came from York and named it New York when they got over here, and New Hampshire and all those kind of things. I was in up near Moscow, Idaho. Well, it's not the same as Moscow, Russia. It just has the same name, that's all. So, after, excuse me. In Genesis chapter 8, verse 1, it tells us, God remembered Noah and every living thing and all the cattle that was with him in the ark, and God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters assuaged. Now, many new versions of the Bible have changed this, and I think have messed it up. They say the water receded. Well, this word assuage means to drop down or to sink down, to subside. This is the word used when someone's anger is assuaged. It drops down. It doesn't move away, it just drops down. It's very different. The water assuaged, meaning the water just began to drop down. I suspect what happened is parts of the crust of the earth sank down, sucking the water into the low place. Other places would lift up, forming mountain ranges. If you look at Genesis chapter 8, verse 2, it says, the waters returned from off the earth continually. And after the end of the 150 days, the waters were abated. There are several different stages to the flood. The 40 days of rain, 150 days of the water having dominion or power over the earth, and then 150 days of going down. That's 5 months. So parts of the earth's crust were probably exposed off and on during this year-long flood. Noah was in the ark for a year. The flood didn't necessarily last a year, but Noah stayed in the ark for 1 year. He got in 7 days before it started, and about 13 months total he was actually in the ark. So probably sections of the earth's crust were not inundated, not underwater the whole time. The crust would be bouncing around, floating up and down. Sometimes you might even get a section that would come up and totally dry out for a few months, and maybe even get wind-blown sandstone formed. There's sand, when it blows and drifts like sand dunes, it makes layers. Sometimes there are petrified sand dunes inside layers of sedimentary rock. You have rock and then sandstone and then more rock. And the evolutionist says, see, this was above water. Yeah, sure was. You're right about that. Because this couldn't form underwater. Well, I disagree with that. There have been, if you fly over the beach, you'll see right down through the water, you can see the wave action makes all kinds of sedimentation in the water, out under the water. You know, a lot of sedimentation does form. So even during the flood, you may get an awful lot of underwater sedimentation of sand that will then pack and dry out. When it lifts up, it'll become above water level and turn to like a petrified sand dune, sort of. But after the end of the 150 days, the waters were abated. I have highlighted here the words returned from off the earth continually. This is the Hebrew words halak vashab, which means going and returning. This gives the indication the water was leaving and then coming back, and then leaving and coming back, sloshing back and forth. If we filled this building full of water 4 feet deep, and we picked up one end of the building, the water would slosh down to one end, but it wouldn't stay there. It would slosh back and go down and come back and go down. And depending on numerous different features, the surface of the earth, what's going on underneath, the shapes of it, how much water, et cetera, what mountains are in the way, depending on many different features, the water would slosh around for a long time, maybe weeks or months. And there may be, during this time, the last part of a year-long flood, I suspect, is when the mountains were formed. Excuse me. If you have mountains lifting up and valleys sinking down, you would have Earth's crust movement, which may cause earthquakes, causing further tsunamis and tidal waves going back and forth. But sedimentary rock is always laid down horizontally, as in with the horizon, flat. Sedimentary rock would be laid down flat, and then as the mountains lifted up, the water would rush off. This gives it energy. The water then is going to race back and forth. The waves are going to bounce back and forth across the oceans as soon as they run into something. And that would depend on so many factors, the size of the ocean, the distance traveled, the depth of the water, how much energy is put into it. But those waves going back and forth are going to wash off the sediment layers and expose them already at twisted angles and deposit new layers on top. Now this in geology is called an unconformity, a place where the layers are crossing each other, but they obviously weren't laid down that way. Grand Canyon has a huge unconformity down at the bottom. This is a schematic of Grand Canyon calling the angular unconformity, where the layers were washed off and then new layers deposited on top, including lava flows. The letter H there is a lava flow. Well, anytime you get the crust of the earth being broken up and shifting around, you're going to have volcanoes going off. So probably during the flood there was volcanic action. After the flood there was volcanic action. There's still volcanic action today. The lava would be flowing during this whole time from different areas. There could be a volcano erupting right now, but it doesn't affect us over here. It doesn't mean the whole world was that way. There were patches of turmoil and patches of tranquility. So underwater lava, when it comes up, it forms, it's very distinctive from lava above water. It's called pillow lava. If you ever see it, a volcano erupting under the ocean or something, it forms very distinctive layers, like pillows. They call it pillow lava. And Mount Ararat, for instance, is pillow lava. Mount Ararat formed underwater. Well, today it's 17,000 feet above water. So something was different. Here we show another schematic of the different rock layers in Grand Canyon. And of course they've got them all named. The very top one is called Kaibab. The top of the canyon is called the Kaibab Uplift. Did you guys stop and see Grand Canyon on the way here?
Yeah.
That's,
Like
yep. That's a big hole in the ground, isn't it?
yeah.
Very impressive. Genesis chapter 8, verse 4 says, "The ark rested in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, upon the mountains of Ararat." Very interesting. If the ark rested in the 7th month, why didn't Noah get out until the 13th month? Why on earth would he stay in there for 6 more months? Probably several reasons why he would not want to get out right away. If the ark hit bottom in the 7th month, it doesn't mean the ark's probably stuck and can't move now, but the waves are still going back and forth across the ocean, and it's not safe to get out. There may still be further movement. Ron Wyatt thinks that Noah's Ark hit bottom. They cut the anchor stones loose sometime later, a few weeks later, maybe a month later, because this was only the 7th month, and it wasn't until the 13th month that they got out. One of these waves could have lifted the ark up and moved it 10 miles and set it down somewhere else. Some of the anchor stones are found quite a ways away from the ark's location, if that is Noah's Ark down in the valley. And again, some other creationist groups get mad at me for even mentioning that there might be another alternative besides the one they're promoting and raising funding for. Genesis chapter 8, verse 5 says, "The waters decreased continually." I think during this time, from the 7th month until the 13th month, when they actually opened the door and got out, during this time, it is best to stay in the ark. The tidal waves outside made it not safe to get out. Secondly, there's nothing to eat out there. Now, during this, after 7 months, many of the seeds that had been floating around would certainly germinate when they landed again. An awful lot of log mats would be floating around, depositing seeds and debris. And see, trees and many plants can grow several different ways. They can grow from seeds, of course. They can grow from cuttings. Some trees or bushes, you cut a branch off, stick it in the ground, and it grows. Others grow from roots. You know, the root sends out, and they call it a runner, sends up another tree growing off this root. So in addition to that, you have the animals and all the food on board that Noah brought for the animals to eat. They're going to continue as they take off out of the ark. You know, many animals deposit seeds as they travel along from the food that they're eating. So it just was safe it's better off to stay in the ark for a few more months, let everything get growing. Jan, you do a lot of gardening. You can plant a garden and raise it to eating height. Raise your tomatoes from seed to ready to eat in how long? 2, 3, 4 months? Depends on conditions, but yeah, a couple of months, right? Basically it's ready to eat, right? Corn, plant the corn. Up in Illinois where I'm from, you know, shoulder high by the 4th of July. It really grows, you know. It's different latitudes. You have a longer day up north in the summer, but a shorter season. So they end up getting the same number of hours of sunlight that we do down here, but consequently they have different planting times for the different crops. But still, within a few months, within 5 or 6 months, certainly, there was plenty of food outside that was just growing on its own from this flood. Things left over in the mud that would begin to germinate and grow. So Noah got out. Okay, Hovind theory, point number 7. Over the next few hundred years, the ice caps generally retreated. Don't forget, the ice now is all the way down to Kansas City, Missouri. Today, the ice caps are way up north. Just parts of northern Canada, you know, have these remaining ice caps. So over the next few hundred years, the ice caps generally retreated. The added water from the melting ice formed the continental shelf. As the cold water absorbed carbon dioxide, lifespans shortened in the days of Peleg. Here's a map showing what the Earth would look like if you lowered the water a couple hundred feet. Vietnam is now connected to Australia. Everything's connected. You know, you look at the globe and say, wow, that's a lot of water there. Well, yeah, but some of it's not very deep. Who remembers what the shallow part of the ocean is called? Continental shelf. Then you go out to the deep part, which is called the abyss. Then in between the two, it rises up, called the continental rise. So that red line shows where the beach would be if you lowered the water a few hundred feet. All of the area around Indonesia, Java, Borneo, all that area is really very shallow water. Same thing out here, between here and Mexico. You know, the Gulf of Mexico, you could walk to Cuba if you lowered the water a few hundred feet. So as the ice melted back, it's going to raise the water an additional few hundred feet, and the ocean's average 12,000 feet deep. So a few hundred feet out of 12,000 is minimal, a few percentage points. There's a great book that you can get called Noah to Abram, The Turbulent Years. In this book, this Dr. Van Vange deals with what did these people do after the flood. Apparently, they right away began building cities. Many of the cities later had to be abandoned as the water came up. Oops, we built too close to the beach. Let's clear out, go build somewhere else. Underwater cities are being found all over the world. It's pretty interesting. Under 150 feet of water. I'll show you some in a minute. But Eric Van Vange in his book here says that probably right after the flood you would have some people who just plain didn't like city life and they would like the adventurous life, so they would be out traveling along the edge of the retreating ice age, ice pack, hunting the animals that are living there. Because as the ice melts back, you got stuff, you know, new food beginning to grow. And some people just prefer the life of a nomad and a hunter. Other people got kicked out of their city, you know, criminals or whatever. People that have the nomadic form of life, that are following animals, for instance, and living off of hunting these animals, like packs of mammoths or whatever, as they're traveling along, they don't want to carry a toolbox with them. They want to carry the minimum. So often they would make stone tools on the job site. You killed an animal, okay, we got to skin them, we got to cut them up, we got to eat them. Make your tools. When you're done, leave them. Move on to the next one. And very frequently, this is what we find with these stone tools found all over the world. Looks like some of them were kind of hastily made. Well, they're only going to use it once, you know. Who cares? Other stone tools show just great craftsmanship where they really took their time to make gorgeous arrowheads and things like that. But these factors would be involved of, are they, you know, chasing a herd of buffalo, following them across the countryside? If so, you're not going to carry your stone tools with you. Stones weigh a lot. This picture shows the underwater land bridge that would be exposed between Russia and Alaska. The water is just not very deep. As the ice melted back, it would leave behind all of what we call ice age effects. I was in Pennsylvania a couple days ago, preaching in northeast Pennsylvania. The whole area was covered by ice. And it's easy to tell if you know what to look for, because there are rounded mountains called drumlins. See those on there marked drumlins? When the ice age, when glaciers move across an area, they'll take a mountain and round it off. And when the ice melts back, it leaves a very distinctive feature called a drumlin. Also, kettle lakes are little depressions in the ground full of water that probably form because of what's called isostatic rebound. As the ice melts back, the pressure, the weight of the ice is gone, and so the ground actually lifts up, trapping water all over the place. Minnesota is loaded with lakes, the land of 10,000 lakes. Most of them are kettle lakes. Most of them not very deep, just trapped. Water has nowhere to go. Doesn't have an outlet. You can see on the picture the terminal moraine on the far right. This would be where the ice bulldozed a pile of rocks up and then left it, retreated back. Along the sides of glaciers, it forms what are called lateral moraines. Lateral meaning along the side. Anyway, the Earth has lots of ice age effects that are easy to tell from those who study this, that there was an ice age. How many have heard of the Matterhorn in Switzerland, the famous mountain? You know, it had a glacier going down both sides of it because it carved part of the mountain away. So it's skinnier at the bottom and then tapers out and then goes back up to the point. It used to be just a big mountain, but parts of the side got eaten away, forming the Matterhorn. It makes a U-shaped valley. It has one on several sides, making it very difficult to climb that mountain. Okay, Genesis 10:25. Interesting verse. It says, "Unto Eber were born two sons. The name of the one was Peleg. For in his days was the earth divided." Well, what happened in the days of Peleg? It says his brother's name was Joktan. Joktan means shorten. Peleg means divided. Very frequently in the Bible, the names have meanings. You know, the person's name indicates something that was happening at that time in history or some significant event. So Peleg means divided. Joktan means shortened. You notice on the chart here, Peleg was born 100 years after the flood. And Peleg only lived to be 239. His daddy lived to be 464. His grandpa lived to be 433. I mean, Peleg died as an old man before his great-great-great-great-grandpa. Noah outlived Peleg. Shem outlived him by a long time. What happened in the days of Peleg? Several different theories of what happened in the days of Peleg. The Bible doesn't tell us. It just simply says, in the days of Peleg, the earth was divided. Apparently, whatever happened in the days of Peleg was genetic because everybody after him inherited it. Whatever it was, they all got it. Because everybody's lifespan dropped off to 200 and 200 and 200 and then down into the 100s. When you get to Abram, he's 175. He's considered a real old man. Actually, when Joseph was introducing his father Jacob to Pharaoh, Pharaoh said to Jacob, "How old are you?" Jacob said, "I'm 130, but this is nothing. Few and evil are the days of the years of my life been, but they've not attained to the days of the years of the life of my fathers." Jacob could have known Shem, Arphaxad, Selah, and Eber. Now something to consider. What did these fellas do for 400 years? A lot of speculation in this area. The Bible doesn't tell us, okay, so we can make up all the stories we want. It could be that they were just retaining and spreading this incredible knowledge that had been amassed. How do you know which plants are poisonous? How do you know which herbs to take for different illnesses? Do you realize how much knowledge there is in the world? How many things there are to learn? How do you know how to take which rock contains iron and which one contains copper, and how do you get it out and what do you do with it? And you know, if you think just in the science of metallurgy, you can study for a lifetime and never learn it all. Then you get into woodworking. How many different kinds of wood are there? And what are they good for? You know, cabinet making. There are thousands of areas of life where you can study for a lifetime and never learn it all. So this knowledge would be retained by these guys, and you had a question. Like, you know, I call Bill Sardi when I got a question about health. You know, he's got all this, his brain is full of this, oh yeah, this vitamin does this and this vitamin does that. You know, he knows, okay? Well, some people have that knowledge of mechanics. Hey, my car's doing this, what do I do? Oh, and you learn as you go through life who to talk to with different questions. You know, nobody can know it all. But if you live to be 400, I bet you could learn to know it all. Or certainly a lot of it. Plus Noah, excuse me, Noah lived to be 950. He lived, you know, a long time after the flood. Okay. In the days of Peleg, something changed. All we have is a few verses in the Bible and a few dates, and we have to guess from there. One theory says the languages were divided. Sometime during the days of Peleg, the languages were divided is one theory. The Bible doesn't tell us. You see, I'll back up and show you the picture again. This genealogy chart is showing us the genealogy of Shem. Well, what happened to Ham and Japheth? The Tower of Babel was built by a guy named Nimrod, who's not in this genealogy. He was in a different family. But if you count how many generations it was from Noah to Nimrod, it would have been roughly the same time as the days of Peleg. Even though the Bible doesn't tell us, because it's not giving us the information for that particular family tree, it's giving us Shem's family tree, which is going to lead to Jesus Christ. But Nimrod would have been about the same time as Peleg. And as they built the Tower of Babel, God divided the languages. So one theory, and I think it's very reasonable, is that probably all that happened in the days of Peleg was the earth was divided by languages. Some people say, well, why would this shorten their lifespan? Well, if they had civilization going again, everybody's going pretty good, and all of a sudden it crumbles because now you got 70 or 80 different languages, and a lot of this knowledge is going to be lost. The guy that used to fix your car now speaks a different language. And you don't know how to do it. You know, the guy that knew which herbs fixed which illnesses is now in a different country, and you can't talk to him. And it would take quite some time to learn these languages. At the same time, they're still just rebuilding civilization. It's been 200 years after this flood. There's still an awful lot to rebuild, and you're busy just surviving. You know, people on a Gilligan's Island situation don't have a lot of time to sit around and play cards. I mean, there's a lot to do just to survive. The people that moved out west, you know, in the early days, they had to work 18 hours a day just to live, you know. It takes you 3 hours a day just to cook. You're going to have chicken tonight. Well, that means you got to go catch the chicken first. Then you got to clean it, and, you know, it's not just, you know, pop it in the microwave. So that's one theory. The second theory says that continents moved. I don't believe this one, because if you move a continent just a couple inches, it's going to kill everybody. It's going to create tidal waves and earthquakes. It's going to be devastating. It could be that there was some movement to the continents. There's still movement to the continents today. But it could be that after the flood, the earth settled for hundreds of years. It may still be settling today from that flood 4,400 years ago. What we see with earthquake activity and stuff like that might just still be leftover remnants from that flood. The earth is still not quite settled into place. Third theory, that says the earth was divided because the water came up. As the ice caps melted back, the water came up and divided the high spots into islands and continents. That is certainly a reasonable theory, and maybe several of these are true. Maybe there's some truth to each of these, I don't know. But If the ice is melting back, what's that doing to the ocean level? It's raising it. What used to be all connected, now all of a sudden, instead of mountains, you now have islands. And the area between becomes filled with water. So that's one theory. The fourth theory says the land was surveyed. By the days of Peleg, they got so many people, they said, look, let's quit fighting over who gets what. Okay, we're going to draw some lines. You know, you get from the tree to the bushes and to the river. You know, here's your property, here's my property. Just like people have done for generations. You know, they divide up the land and they put up a fence and say, you know, this is my side, that's your side. Stay over there. I don't think that would have an effect on shortening lives. But number three certainly would. If the water's coming up, it's coming up because of ice melt, which is going to lower the temperature of the water. As water gets colder, it starts to absorb carbon dioxide. When your soda pop gets warm, it loses its fizz. Carbon dioxide is what they put into soda pop to make it fizzy. Okay? If it gets colder, it's going to absorb CO2. As it gets warmer, it loses CO2. So cold water would tend to absorb CO2 out of the oxygen, out of the air, out of the atmosphere. And CO2 is a greenhouse gas that is one of the many things that protects us from radiation. So if they began, 200 years after the flood, began to lose their protection from radiation, that may cause genetic factors to come in, that they begin to live shorter lives because of increased radiation, because of decreased carbon dioxide, chain of events. Okay? So these ice caps are melting back, forming the glacier effects, and raising the oceans. As the oceans get more water in them, three things happen. They get wider, deeper, and colder. As the oceans get wider, this is going to create a continental shelf. It appears like that used to be the beach way out there. And it might have been the beach for a while until this, as the ice melted back. And I suspect in some areas, like in Washington, where I just was in Dry Falls, Washington, there might have been, as the ice was melting back, there might have been a giant lake dammed up. All of a sudden it gets too much water in it, it all flows out. Great Dry Falls, Washington, they say there was more water going over that. There's no water over it now. I mean, it's a dry waterfall. But there was more water going over that at one time than all of the rivers in all of the world combined. Well, probably that was a post-flood Ice Age lake, and it might have been 100 or 200 years after the flood. All of a sudden, all that water dumps through. It finally got enough melted back. As ice melts, it does funny things. Sometimes you have a glass of Coke with a bunch of ice in it, all of a sudden you hear a noise and it's flipping over. You know, ice does all sorts of strange things as it melts back. And it may have trapped a large lake right there in Dry Falls, Washington, just about 100 miles from Spokane. It's 100 miles to the left, to the west. If you look at this map, you know the English Channel between England and France is less than 150 feet deep. 150 feet from here to the street. Not even that. That's 300 feet from here to the street. That's 30 miles wide. Get some graph paper and draw a graph showing what 150 feet looks like on 30 miles. It's nothing. France and England and Ireland and Scotland and Wales was probably all part of one big countryside. You could actually walk to Iceland. There might have been some ice dams that broke loose and carved out little valleys later, but there's underwater erosion marks all over the place. Do you see between Norway and Scotland, like that little valley underwater? Right about dead center in the picture. I bet there was some erosion, some water running into the North Sea, and the whole canyon is now underwater. It's filled in. Underwater erosion marks are very common all over the world. As the Atlantic Ocean filled in, it would finally spill backwards into the Mediterranean. Now let's suppose this happened 200 years after the flood was over. In 200 years, how many people could there be on the earth? You have no reason to not have lots of kids. Matter of fact, it's an advantage to have lots of kids. You got more hands to farm the land, you know, take care of things. So let's just suppose if they're living to be 400 years old, Suppose they're having 40 kids per family, or 50 kids. You do that for 200 years, you got a population of thousands of people already. They're building cities. Now, if you're building a city in what is now the Mediterranean Sea, a couple of hundred years later, all of a sudden the Mediterranean Sea fills in. Water comes up. Oops, we built our city too close to the beach. Let's get out of here. As it got a little deeper there, it would spill over past Sicily into the other half of the Mediterranean Sea. And then as it got deeper, it would spill back into the Black Sea. Here's an article, Ancient Egyptian cities discovered under 30 feet of water in the Mediterranean Sea. Sea level was lower at some time in the past. Oh, I agree. And as all that water goes rushing in by the Rock of Gibraltar, it's going to carve out that canyon between Africa, Morocco, and Spain, the Rock of Gibraltar. This water rushing in is finally going to backfill the Black Sea. That would probably be the last thing that happened. That might have been 300 or 400 years after the flood, by the time the Black Sea gets backfilled. So the water is probably running backwards through Istanbul, where Istanbul, Turkey is today, all the Straits of the Dardanelles. As this water went, now today it flows the other direction, but initially it would have flowed backwards. They found all sorts of cities under 150 feet of water in the Black Sea. You can see the old beach line, ancient shoreline on this picture. Well, yeah, I believe the Black Sea was probably smaller and it now has a flooded shelf. No question, not a problem with me. When this was discovered in 2000, the summer of 2000, the scuba divers discovered cities under 150 feet of water. Articles came out all over the paper. They said, oh, we have finally found evidence for Noah's flood. No, this is not evidence for Noah's flood. And they said, see, this city flooded and everybody drowned, and this is probably where the legend came from for Noah and the flood. Because it was a local little flood over there in the Black Sea. No, duh. Noah's flood was a worldwide flood. So I think the continental shelf and all continental slope and all that stuff and continental rise is best explained by the ice caps melting back. Okay, today we still see the Earth showing effects of this devastating flood. Just about everything we see in the world can remind us of this flood. The hills, the valleys, the natural gas, the fossils, the coal, the oil. There are reminders everywhere to remind us of God's judgment. When you find a herd of dinosaur bones, you ought to conclude, you know, there was a disaster. This place was wrecked. But instead, Satan has twisted this where people see Grand Canyon and they think of millions of years instead of seeing Grand Canyon and thinking of flood. Satan has blinded the minds of those. Of course, some of them don't want to believe anyway, so they would welcome any opportunity to doubt God's Word. There's a canyon I saw when I was in Idaho, a little bitty creek flowing at the bottom of this massive canyon that flows right into the Snake River. And you can just see flood written all over this place if you're willing to look for it. This type of topography in this picture from Reader's Digest Atlas of the World shows what is called karst topography, where you have caves up in the upper left-hand corner. The caves, the limestone, erodes pretty quickly. Limestone is very susceptible to acid. If you put muriatic acid, which is hydrochloric acid, which your stomach produces, if you put it on concrete, it'll dissolve it. You can use muriatic acid, which you can buy at a swimming pool supply house for $2 or $3 a gallon. Sprinkle it on concrete, it'll start to eat the concrete away. And you can clean concrete or you can clean ceramic tile with this. Be sure to use a lot of ventilation. You don't want to breathe that stuff. You take a whiff of that, it'll burn your nasal cavities, clear down to your toenails. But somebody's going to write and say, oh, Hovind's stupid. He thinks toenails are connected to the nasal cavities. No, I don't. It's a joke, okay? Lighten up. I taught anatomy. I know they're not connected. But people ridicule me over the silliest thing. Anyway, the coal is often found in layers. They use strip mining to dig the coal out. Layer of dirt, layer of coal, another layer of dirt, another layer of coal. I think the best explanation for the karst topography and all of the topography of the oceans, of the world, of the Earth's crust, is the flood. There's a great book by Walt Brown called about the hydroplate theory. His version of the flood, or his description of it, is slightly different than mine. But He does not believe there was a canopy before. I think there had to be for several reasons, but he still has a great book, and I recommend it. I tell people I learned years ago to eat the meat and spit out the bones. You know, I can learn things from some people and not believe everything they believe. I can learn things from a Mormon and Jehovah's Witness and a Buddhist, you know. That's perfectly fine. You can learn stuff from everybody. This is an interesting fossil. We're going to close here with this. There's a picture of a fish eating another fish. Either that or the little one is a dentist, I don't know. But neither one of them thought they were going to die that day. They were caught in the middle of supper, turned into a fossil. Had to be buried extremely quickly for this to happen. Fish fossils are found with the gills extended, the fins extended in obvious positions of terror. They're scared. Wow, what's going on? Probably buried in underwater landslides, or just simply all of a sudden the water becomes like a giant mud puddle and they can't breathe. And so they're panicking. I'm suffocating. You know, fish can suffocate too. You know, fish can drown, believe it or not. So they're swimming along and they're terrified by what's happening, and they die and get packed into situations like this. Now, I get a lot of letters. People will say, see, that picture you show of the fish eating other fish proves they weren't vegetarian before the flood. Well, a couple of problems with that. We don't know for sure when this fossil formed, okay? I think it probably formed because of the flood, but it may have been later. Secondly, I don't know that fish are considered alive in the biblical sense. Though they don't have nostrils, they don't have the breath of life, that's for sure. So it could be that a fish is just considered a complicated, self-replicating food source, as opposed to live, like with a spirit, like an animal has a spirit, goes back to God that gave it. It says in the book of Ecclesiastes about the animals. So I don't think insects either are alive in the biblical sense. As far as people say, well, Adam might have stepped on an ant and killed it, see, and there would have been death before sin. That's a stretch. First you have to define what is life before you can define what is death. And I don't think you could prove that insects have life in the same sense that man has life or animals have life. Okay. Bible tells us it's appointed unto man once to die, but after this, the judgment. This guy, Harry Truman, lived on the side of Mount St. Helens when it was about to blow up. Tim Behrens, his KJSL radio station, I'm on every Wednesday morning with Tim and Al, St. Louis station. Tim Behrens witnessed to Harry Truman, not the president, okay, to this Harry Truman. He said Harry was a very profane man. About every other word was a cuss word. He listened very carefully about the gospel and then rejected it, refused Jesus Christ. When the volcano blew, Harry was still there. They told him, Harry, this volcano is going to blow up. He said, I've been living here for 80 years and I'm staying right here. Well, he stayed right there. Still there. Matter of fact, they never did find him after the eruption. He's probably under 80 feet of mud right now, or 300 feet of ash. But that's so silly to know the volcano is going to blow up and not get off. Well, folks, we've been warned the entire earth is going to blow up. You better get ready for that. You better accept Jesus Christ. Just like there was warning before Mount St. Helens blew, there is warning from Scripture before the earth falls apart. You better get in Christ. You better be saved, or you're in trouble someday. He that hath the Son hath life. He that hath not the Son of God hath not life. So I recommend everybody get saved. The Bible tells us about the flood in Matthew 24. It says, but as the days of Noah were, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. For in the days before the flood they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day Noah entered into the ark, and knew not, till the flood came and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. So, just like the flood is a good symbol or typology of what in the days of Noah, the earth was destroyed, that's a symbol or a good typology of what's happening today. How many people listen to Noah? Just almost nobody. Noah's job was to preach, whether they listen or not. Our job is to do the same thing. Some are going to listen, some aren't. Oh well. After the break, we'll take up what we cover on our videotape number 7, question-answer session, coming up right after the break, and we should, in the next 4 classes or 5 classes, be able to finish, I hope, everything we have on videotape 7 Q&A. So let's take a little break, come right back. All right, welcome back. Now we're going to start into what is on our seminar part 7, question-answer session. This is where we throw everything else we don't have time to cover in our seminar. The pot pie, the leftovers, all goes into this, things I didn't have time or didn't have interest in covering in the seminar. So we're going to cover a wide variety of topics in no particular order. If you're trying to put order to this, good luck. If you do get a good order to it and can write an outline, send it to me. I'll use it, okay? Because we don't have one for part 7. Ecclesiastes chapter 7. Solomon said, I applied my heart to know and to search and to seek out wisdom and the reason of things. I think it's interesting that God made the brain so that it can store information. And also, He gave us a curiosity to want to know things. There's just a lot of things to learn in this world, and it's exciting to learn, okay? 1 Peter chapter 3, it says, be ready always to give an answer. One of our jobs as Christians, as children of God, is to be able to give an answer to those who would like to know. We need to study, according to 2 Timothy 2:15. Study to show ourselves approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. Okay, first question we're going to cover, because I get this all the time in my debates and stuff. The skeptics will say, well, don't all scientists believe in evolution? What they're trying to imply by that is, since you don't believe in evolution, you can't be a scientist. If your definition says, in order to be a scientist, you have to believe in evolution, then, if that's the way you're going to define it, then of course all scientists believe in evolution by your definition. But who decides who's a scientist anyway? I mean, who's making this call? Is there a committee someplace that's voting on this? Who makes the decision? Of course, according to the Mormons, you can't be godly unless you're a Mormon. And according to the Jehovah's Witnesses, you can't be godly unless you're one of them. I mean, every group does this. And the scientists often are no different. They think, well, you can't be a scientist unless you believe in evolution. So therefore, if you don't believe in evolution, you are not a scientist. In John chapter 7, in verse number 40, very interesting passage here, and I'll watch this carefully. Many of the people, therefore, when they heard this saying, said, of a truth, this is the prophet. Others said, this is the Christ. But some said, shall Christ come out of Galilee? Hath not the Scripture said that Christ cometh of the seed of David and out of the town of Bethlehem where David was? So there was a division among them, among the people because of him. And some of them would have taken him, but no man laid hands on him. Then came the officers to the chief priests and Pharisees, and they said unto them, why have ye not brought him? And the officers said, never man spake like this man. Then answered them the Pharisees, are ye also deceived? Have any of the rulers or of the Pharisees believed on him? This people who knoweth not the law are cursed. Okay, let's stop right here and look at some of the logic here. The people divided over a question. I thought the Bible says Christ comes out of Bethlehem and this guy comes out of Galilee. Right away, they're arguing about the wrong subject, aren't they? They didn't have all the knowledge they needed to make this argument. Jesus did come from Bethlehem, didn't he? He's born in Bethlehem. He grew up in Galilee. So when the Scripture said he comes out of Bethlehem, it's exactly correct. So here they are arguing about the wrong subject, vehemently, divided over this, okay? Then the chief priests sent the officers to get him. Why didn't they go? I see this all the time in debates, or in seminars. There'll be a group of students that'll come from some university, and they come with a list of questions to ask me, to trick me. I say, where did you get those questions? Well, from my professor. Why didn't he come? He sends the students. I answer all their questions. They leave confused. They go back to their professor, and then he makes fun of them for being so stupid that they couldn't trick me. Watch what happened here. The guys came back, and the Pharisees said, why didn't you take him? And they said, nobody ever spoke like this guy. Then their logic, watch the logic here. It's exactly what happens today on the creation evolution topic. No different. They said, are ye also deceived? Have any of the rulers or of the Pharisees believed on him? What are they trying to imply by that? Since none of us guys who know the Bible believe in him, therefore he can't be right. This is what some of the scientists will say. Well, how many scientists believe in creation? Same kind of thing, okay? Since no scientists believe in creation, therefore it must not be true. Well, first place, A lot of scientists believe in creation, okay? And secondly, I'd like to find out who's deciding who's a scientist. So they started with a false assumption that Jesus was from Galilee. And since the Pharisees had not believed on him, they used that as proof that he was not right. Same thing today. The scientists will say, well, because most scientists believe in evolution, therefore evolution must be true. We'll talk about flawed logic from the start. Okay? No, all scientists don't believe in evolution, for one thing. And even if they did, that still would mean nothing in an argument. They'll say, has he published in major science journals? Well, suppose in order to publish a paper in a science journal, you have to publish something that doesn't go against the evolution theory. If your article smacks of creationism, it'll be rejected. Same thing happened in the Soviet Union 15 years ago. Suppose you got up in front of your class of kids in the Soviet Union and said, boys and girls, I don't believe in communism. Doesn't work. Capitalism is a much better system. What would happen? You wouldn't be teaching tomorrow, would you? You'd be lucky to be alive tomorrow, right? So then the teachers get up in front of their students and say, all the teachers believe in communism. Therefore, it must be right. No, therefore, it must be ruthless. Right? And if they say, all scientists believe in evolution, well, it's not true, but even if it was true, that still wouldn't prove it's right. That might just prove it's ruthless. In other words, if you don't believe in it, you'll get fired. And I'll show you some examples where they did get fired here in a second. The majority followed Aaron into rebellion in Exodus chapter 32. The majority voted not to go into the promised land. Remember that? 10-2. The majority was wrong, all right? The majority followed false gods many times throughout the Old Testament. They were wrong. The majority of religious leaders hated Jesus. They were wrong. The majority of the Roman Empire hated Christians. Majority opinion means nothing in an argument. And many thousands of scientists with degrees from major universities do believe in creation. But you don't have to have a degree from a university to be a scientist. Many people down through history didn't even finish high school and became great inventors and great scientists, you know. They just had a desire to learn, a desire to use what they had learned to improve things or invent new things. The guy who has the patent on the MRI machine is a creationist. Robert Gentry, who lost his job at Oak Ridge Laboratories in Knoxville, Tennessee, because they found out he was a creationist. He wrote the book that we sell called Creation's Tiny Mystery about the radiopolonium halos. He was one of the world's experts on granite, because he was assigned the task of deciding where do we put radioactive waste. You know, after a nuclear power plant gets done, you got this barrel of radioactive material. What do you do with it? You don't want it in your backyard, that's for sure. So they dig deep holes and they bury it in granite. Well, as they were taking samples of granite from all over the world, Robert Gentry's looking at these things under the microscope, and he finds out they have little rings in them, circles, called radiopolonium halos. And we'll get into that later, how it absolutely proves the earth was created cold, like the Bible says, and the earth is not billions of years old. And so his articles are being published in all the major magazines all over the world, Science Magazine, Nature Magazine. Everybody publishes this amazing stuff by Robert Gentry about this new find of radiopolonium halos. Until somebody figured out, this proves the Big Bang Theory is not true. Well, they shut him off like a spigot, man. He couldn't get anything published anywhere because it didn't go along with the evolution theory. So he lost his job and grant money. Roger DeHart was told he could not inform students of errors in the textbooks by passing out articles from current science journals. All he did in his science class, he never talked about creation. He would just say, kids, in this book right here on page 95, there's an article about, such and such. But this has been proven wrong. Here's a current science journal showing where it's been proven wrong. Pass it out. Can you imagine that? He was called in to say, you cannot inform the kids of more recent research that goes against the textbook. What on earth is somebody thinking? But he was told, you can't do that because it went against the evolution theory. Kevin Haley was a biology teacher at Oregon Community College. He lost his job for simply exposing errors in the textbooks. He is a creationist, but he never told them he was. He just showed them, hey, here's an error in our textbook. This is wrong, okay? At Baylor University in Waco, Texas, William Dembski, in April of 2000, was fired because he advocated intelligent design instead of evolution. He just said, you know, things we study are so complex, they must have been designed. Oh, that's all it takes. He's out of there. Baylor, Southern Baptist School, you know, fired. Forrest Mims was a science writer for 20 years. He published articles in National Geographic, in Science Digest, the American Journal of Physics. 60 magazines and newspapers published his articles. He was denied a job as a writer for Scientific American because he was a creationist. Subjects he would write on were not even involving creation or evolution. But because he believed in creation, he couldn't even write on other topics. Then the scientists turn around and say, well, how many creationists are writing for major magazines? Well, duh, yeah. How many capitalists are teaching in Soviet Union? You know, it's the same thing. No difference whatsoever. Rod LeVake in Faribault, Minnesota, was reassigned to a different position because he even raised doubts about Darwin's theory. Don't even make the kids question this. If you do, you're not qualified to be a biology teacher. Get that guy out of biology class. Put him somewhere else. The guy that wrote the book that we carry, Pandas and People, oh, excuse me. One of the authors of that book was a major biology teacher for years at Sanford or one of the San Francisco colleges. When he got saved, he used to write textbooks about evolution. Textbooks that people would use in schools about evolution. When he got saved and became a creationist, they tried to fire him. But because he had 20 years, he was tenured professor, they couldn't fire him, so they reassigned him as a lab assistant. Usually college juniors and seniors are the lab assistants. Here, go wash these test tubes, you know, clean this mess up. The guy had written books about evolution, but once he became a creationist, oh, he's out the door. Okay, you can no longer be a scientist if you don't believe in evolution. This is the logic that we have to face. John chapter 7. Shall Christ come out of Galilee? They're arguing about the wrong thing. So when they say, don't all scientists believe in evolution? I'm sorry, they're arguing the wrong subject. The average person can see the truth. Many of the people, therefore, said, when they heard this saying, said, of a truth, this is the prophet. Others said, this is the Christ. But some said, shall Christ come out of Galilee? See, the Pharisees didn't believe in him, but the common person could see. The average ordinary person with half a brain and normal intelligence can see evolution is not true. It can't happen. But the scientists get together and say, oh, well, all scientists believe in it, and if you don't believe in it, you're going to be fired, by the way. You know, go get them evolution, you know. That's what's going on. Okay. Some of them would have taken him, but no man laid hands on him. Same thing today. There are some people who teach evolution and believe in evolution that would love to have anybody that doesn't believe it. They hate people like me. I get hate mail all the time. You know, it's hilarious to read some of the stuff. Nearly always unsigned. One guy wrote a letter to some great preacher years ago. Just one word on the letter. Fool! Sent it to the preacher. The preacher got up that night in front of this, I think it was Billy Sunday or something. He got up in front of this crowd of 10 or 15,000 people and said, well, I get letters all the time that are anonymous, but I finally got one that he signed his name but forgot to write the letter. The Pharisee said, why have you not brought him? Why didn't you bring him to us? Yeah, the professors send their students to do the dirty work. They didn't go themselves. And scientists today and evolutionists today will try to use the law to silence creationists. They'll try to pass a law or try to twist a law to say you can't talk about creation in schools. Rather than just deal with the subject, if evolution is so true, prove it to us and we'll shut up. Just prove it. Show us the evidence. Are you also deceived? Translated means, are you stupid? Have any of the rulers or the Pharisees believed on him? In other words, hey, all scientists believe it, therefore it must be true. John 7:49 says, but this people who knoweth not the law are cursed. What are they trying to imply by that? You're stupid, we're smart. Can you read that into that pretty easily? We're smart, you're dumb. I get this attitude all the time when I do debates. And I have people get up and they'll say, you know, the evolutionist will say, well, the average person doesn't understand the complexity of this topic. And I'll say to the audience, now folks, let me translate what he just said. What he just said is, you're stupid, he's smart. You're too dumb to understand. And then I'll say, how many of you believe that that's what he just implied? And every hand goes up, you know. Of course that's what he implied. You know, I'm smart, you're too dumb to understand, you know, the complexity of evolution. Basically, if you disagree with me, you must be dumb. That's what they're trying to not say. Nicodemus saith unto them, he that came to Jesus by night, being one of them, doth our law judge any man before it hear him, and knoweth not what he doeth, and knoweth what he doeth? They answered and said unto him, art thou also of Galilee? Search and look, for out of Galilee ariseth no prophet. Again, arguing about the wrong subject. But even some of the non-believers had sense enough to listen to reason, like Nicodemus, and think about the other side. Go home and think about it. If you're a scientist and you believe in evolution, that's certainly your privilege. You have the right to do that. But at least think about what the other people are saying. Think about the creationist view. Don't just discount it. There is probably more peer pressure in the scientific community than there is in the average 5th grade class. You know, 5th graders, they got to wear the right clothes because of their friends, you know, or 7th graders, you know. They're scared of peer pressure. What are my friends going to think? Scientists are much worse at that. There's peer pressure in the scientific community. We need somebody with some backbone to say, I don't care what anybody says, you know. I'm doing what's right. Here's a list of some of the major scientists of the past who were creationists. Nearly every branch of science in the world was started by somebody who believed in creation. Francis Bacon invented our scientific method. He was a creationist. Johann Kepler, the great astronomer, was a creationist. I won't read them all to you, but there are thousands and thousands of people who are creationists. Cotton Mather, the physician, was a creationist. John Woodward, paleontology. Now, people began to use the research of these guys and twist it into evolution. And some of these guys were old Earth compromisers. They believed there was a creator, but thought maybe the Earth was millions of years old. Especially those in the early 1800s, when it really became a lot of peer pressure to teach the Earth was old and try to fit it into the Bible with the gap theory and the day-age theory. That started way before Darwin, early 1800s. Carolus Linnaeus, who invented our classification system that we still use today, you know, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. He was a creationist. All through history, you can see these people were creationists. John Dalton, George Cuvier, he was a compromiser, but many of these folks, they believed, look, there's had to be a creator. And they started whole branches of science that are still in existence today. A lot of geologists were creationists. Samuel Morse invented the telegraph and the Morse code invented the Morse code anyway. Charles Babbage, operations research, computer science, wouldn't have computers if it weren't for the research of guys like this that were creationists. Louis Agassiz did a lot of study on glaciers, was a creationist. Today, Stephen Gould, the Marxist communist professor at Harvard University, works in the Agassiz Museum, named after a creationist. See some, boy, I can stop and talk about many of these guys, you know, James Joule, thermodynamics. The Joule is named after him, you know, a unit of energy, named after James Joule. Louis Pasteur, pasteurized milk. Any milk carton that'll remind you of creation. If you see pasteurized down there from Louis Pasteur's name. James Clerk Maxwell, electrodynamics, statistical thermodynamics. All through history, these folks were creationists. I'll just page down real slowly and let you look at some of the names. Andros Fleming. Wilder Smith had 3 doctoral degrees in sciences, was a creation science pioneer, and spoke prolifically on creation, just died here recently. So many people today are scientists and are creationists. Many people are actually afraid to let people know they're creationists for fear they'll lose their job. Because it does happen. Okay, there is a discrimination against creationists. Okay, next question. What about separation of church and state? Well, there's no such phrase in the Constitution. There's no such thing as separation of church and state. That sentence was used by Thomas Jefferson in a letter written to Pastor Danbury, a Baptist in Dayton, Connecticut in 1802. Jefferson said, "The First Amendment has erected a wall of separation between church and state." By the way, wallbuilders.com, David Barton has a great ministry. He said that wall is a one-dimensional wall. It keeps government from running the church, but it makes sure that Christian principles will always stay in government. The same day they voted in the amendments to the Constitution, the 10 amendments, including the First Amendment, same day they voted to give $500 to a Catholic priest to help the Indians in St. Louis. Well, now, obviously these guys weren't thinking of total separation between church and state, were they? Same guys, same day, voted that money to a Catholic priest. Okay. Lots more on separation of church and state on video number 4. It's perfectly fine, though, for the church to influence the state. They're supposed to try to influence the state. What's happened in the last 100 years particularly, many churches have given up being churches and become corporations. Once a church becomes a 501c3 corporation, in order to give a tax write-off, that's their excuse, and it goes back to the love of money, root of all evil. They are now not really a church anymore. They're an agent of the state. See, the state gives corporations the right to exist. God gives His church the right to exist. And one of the dumbest things any church could do would be to become a 501c3 corporation. We cover lots more of that on video number 5 of our series about churches incorporating. Major mistake. And it's easy to get out of, to undo that. You can contact Pastor Mooneyhan if you want more information on how to get unincorporated. His number is 352-498-0384. I call him about once a week, with different questions on things. He's coming here tomorrow, as a matter of fact. Okay, next week we'll take up more questions and answers from our frequently asked question section, what's on our videotape number 7, and try to finish in the next 4 or 5 weeks, whatever we've got left in this class, and get everything done on our Q&A. Thanks for joining us. See you next week. Welcome to class number 6 of Creation Science 104. We are covering what's on our seminar tape number 7, our frequently asked questions or question answer session. For those of you just joining us, you may want to watch the previous lessons or classes to get caught up. Okay, a question I frequently get asked is, what about the separation of church and state? By the way, I apologize for my voice. Still having trouble from talking too much 2 weeks ago in Pennsylvania. Strained something, I guess. Can creation or the Bible be discussed in public schools? Answer, absolutely yes. There are no laws against teaching creation science in public schools. There never has been. There are no laws against reading the Bible in a public school. There are court cases against teachers trying to proselytize students on state salary. I mean, if the state's paying you to teach, you can't try to convert the kid to be a Baptist or Buddhist or Catholic while you're being paid by the state. But there's actually no such thing as separation of church and state. That phrase is never mentioned in the Constitution anywhere. Thomas Jefferson wrote a letter to Pastor Danbury in Connecticut, Dayton, Connecticut, back in 1802. In the letter, Thomas Jefferson said, "The First Amendment has erected a wall of separation between church and state." And many people think that phrase is in the Constitution, and it's not. The Constitution simply says the government can make no laws regarding an established religion or establishing a religion. The government is hands-off when it comes to religion, which is why the government has no authority to tax churches. They have no authority to require them to get building permits. They simply have no authority over the church, period. It's a separate sovereign, a different entity. However, most churches have fallen into the trap of becoming 501c3 corporations. And now the government does have the authority to tell them what to do, because the government establishes corporations. They allow them to exist. But a true church that is not incorporated or gets unincorporated, the government simply has no authority over them. 150 years ago, 200 years ago, congressmen and senators and representatives were scared stiff of preachers, because the preacher would get up in the pulpit and say, "Oh, Senator Jones did blah, blah, blah," and he'd just call his name and, spill the beans on them. Well, churches were very involved in politics. Matter of fact, if it hadn't been for the churches, we never would have won the Revolutionary War. During the Revolution, King George's soldiers, in many instances, deliberately targeted churches to burn down, to try to arrest pastors, because they were the rabble-rousers. The book In Caesar's Grip, which we have in our bookstore over there, would be an awesome one to read if you want more on that. Jeff, have you got into that one yet? In Caesar's? Oh, you're going to love that one by Peter Kershaw. It's an excellent book on that topic. Anyway, there's no such thing as separation of church and state. What it's supposed to be, the church, by the way, when Congress voted in the First Amendment, where they said Congress shall make no law establishing a religion, the same day they voted to give $100 or $500 or something to a Catholic missionary to help the Indians in St. Louis. Wallbuilders.com website is by David Barton. He speaks all over the world on the topic of what our founding fathers' philosophy was. And he said, the wall is a one-dimensional wall. It keeps the government from running the church, but it makes sure Christian principles will always stay in government. And we covered lots more on that earlier. So there's no such thing as separation of church and state. How can we see stars billions of light years away? I frequently get asked this question, matter of fact, every week. The atheists and scoffers, I do a debate this Monday night in California. I'll be doing a debate, and I'm sure it'll come up again, If the earth is only 6,000 years old, like the Bible teaches, the whole universe is only 6,000 years old, how do we see stars billions of light years away? Well, there's no question there's an awful lot of stars out there. The Bible says in Nehemiah chapter 9, Thou, even thou art Lord alone, thou hast made the heaven of heavens, with all their host, the earth, and all things that are therein, the seas and all that is therein, and thou preservest them all, and the host of heaven worshipeth thee. There's no question the Bible teaches God made the stars, and there are a lot of them. But if stars evolve, like they tell us in school, star births should equal star deaths. Just logical. If the birth rate is less than the death rate in a population, what is going to eventually happen? Extinction. They're all going to be gone, right? If the birth rate is greater than the death rate, like it is right now, then the population grows. Well, nova and supernova, a supernova is just a bigger nova, supernova, okay? Nova is when a star explodes, just blows up. And you can study for years about why stars blow up, and the theories at least behind what causes novas and supernovas. In Spanish, nova means won't go, will not move. Vamos is, va means go. Nova is no go. So when Chevy tried to sell the Chevy Nova in Mexico, it didn't go over very well. They had to change the name to something else. You want to buy a no-go? No, I don't want to buy a no-go. Stars have been observed to fall apart. They blow up. It's called a nova. Big ones are called supernova. It appears that one blows up about every 25 or 30 years on the average. Nobody's ever seen one star forming. Not one has ever been observed to form. Astronomers have observed about every 30 years a star dies and explodes into a supernova. If the universe is billions of years old, how come there are less than 300 supernova, dead stars? There should be several hundred million of them. ICR has a great article about that, September 1998, Institute for Creation Research. That's a good point. Let's suppose stars explode every 30 years on the average, and there are only 300 of them. 300 times 30, 9,000. 9,000 years, max. Why, I thought the earth was billions of years old. Why aren't there more dead stars out there? You won't hear the evolutionists or atheists talk about this much, but it is a very serious problem. There's no question there's a lot of stars. And I've had several skeptics tell me, oh yes, stars are forming in Crab Nebula. You can watch the dust out there and you see a bright spot in the dust. That's a star forming. Well, duh, if this was a court of law, and you said, Your Honor, I see a bright spot behind the dust, that proves a star is forming. No, Your Honor, that proves the dust is clearing. The star was there all along, right? And that's the only one they've got to hang their hat on. Okay, they think a star, they call it a star nursery. It's being born out there. Yeah, right. Maybe stars are being born. There's a problem, though. Dust does not accumulate. It takes an enormous amount of gravity to get it started coming in. But get a cloud of smoke. It'll never come together to make a particle. It dissipates. It falls apart. In order to get the dust to overcome the natural spreading out, called Brownian motion, in order to get them to overcome that, you have to have energy to squeeze it together. So you get all this energy to squeeze it together. Now you get a mass that has gravity, which starts attracting other things. But the energy required to squeeze it together is incredible. Actually, they say it would take the energy from 20 exploding stars to produce enough energy to make a brand new one. Had an atheist tell me in a debate one time, he said, well, you know, if 20 stars explode near each other, it'll make a brand new star. I said, well, that's brilliant. You got to lose 20 to gain one. You ought to run for Congress and help those guys borrow their way out of debt. You're not going to get ahead if you lose 20 to gain one. I mean, figure it out. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to think about it. Genesis chapter 1 says, God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and seasons, and for days and years. And he made the stars also. The Bible's real clear. God made the stars on day 3, this would have been, or day 4. Day 4, he made the sun, moon, and stars. Day 3, he made the plants. So if he made the stars on day 4, after the earth. Now see, according to evolution, stars are made first and then the earth. According to the Bible, earth is made first and then the stars. Absolutely backwards. And guys like Hugh Ross and everybody's always trying to accommodate what they think is acceptable science with trying to make the Bible bend to fit their scientific theory. Not going to work. Psalm 147, he counts the number of the stars. Interesting verse. That doesn't say he knows how many there are. He knows the number of each one. That is star number 2,572 million. He knows the number of each one. It also says he knows the number of the hairs of your head. That doesn't just mean he knows how many. It means he's a number of each one. See, there's number... No, that's pretty smart. It's been estimated there are enough stars in the sky right now that we've discovered that everybody on Earth can personally own 2 trillion of them. Plenty to go around. The Hubble telescope was directed to focus in on a dot. They thought they found a black spot in space, no stars, right above the Big Dipper. It's about the size of a grain of rice held at arm's length, a grain of sand held at arm's length. Pretty tiny spot. The Hubble, because of the way it was positioned going around the Earth, it was able, even though it's going around the Earth, it was able at all times to focus on that spot continuously. You know, we can only see the stars a couple hours a night, then they're gone in the daylight. The Hubble was going around in such a position it could focus on that spot continually. After 10 days, they discovered there are more stars in that spot than they could count. These are ones they didn't know about before, plus the ones they already know about. Right. They say there are billions, if not trillions, of galaxies, and each galaxy contains trillions of stars. And each star contains how many atoms? Bunch, right? Stephen Hawking, who hates creationists, said, stars are so far away that they appear to us to be just pinpoints of light. We cannot see their size or shape. So how can we tell different types of stars apart? For the vast majority of stars, there's only one characteristic feature we can observe, the color of their light. When you get the biggest telescope in the world and look at the closest star, all you see is a dot. When we look at stars through a telescope, you just see nothing but a dot. Biggest telescope still sees just a dot. If you look at the sun through a telescope, you see flames leaping off, and you can see all sorts of features on the sun, the spicules on the surface, and it looks like oatmeal, boiling oatmeal. But you don't see that with a star. People say, oh, the sun is just a medium-sized star. Maybe it is, I don't know. But we don't even have a clue what the other stars really actually look like, other than their color. Now, when they study the star light coming in, they can tell certain things about it, what kind of metals are burning. If you burn a piece of copper in a hot flame, it'll burn green. Different colors burn, different metals burn different colors. So if you want fireworks for 4th of July and you want them to blow up and be red, you put in a certain metal. If you want them to be green or yellow, you can make different colors by grinding up metals, mixing them in with whatever's exploding. They look at these stars and all you see is a dot. How do you tell the distance to something like that? How far away is it? Well, the way to tell the distance to an unknown object, some object you cannot touch, is to use trigonometry. If you get 2 observation points focusing in on a third dot, you can calculate the unknown distance if you know the distance between your 2 observation points and you know the angles with simple high school trig, sine, cosine, tangent. If you want to know the distance across a river, you stand one spot on the bank of the river, look at a tree, make a line, imaginary line, go down to another place and look at the same tree and make a triangle, and measure the distance between your 2 observations and get the angles. You can calculate the distance across the river real accurately, depending how accurate your measurements are. Well, the problem is the Earth is only 8,000 miles in diameter. 8,000 miles is really nothing compared to star distance. So if I'm looking at a star here in Florida, somebody on the opposite side of the world in China is looking at a star. Actually, the opposite side's down south of the equator, 30 degrees, be the middle of the Indian Ocean. Opposite from Pensacola is in the ocean over here. The opposite through the northern hemisphere would be China, but opposite through the world is actually Indian Ocean. Who cares? Anyway, it's 8,000 miles across the Earth. If 2 people on opposite sides of the world are looking at the same star, they basically have 2 parallel lines, because 8,000 miles just doesn't count. What they've done to enlarge the base on the triangle, you look at the star in January, you wait 6 months, look at the star in June, and now you have a much bigger base on your triangle. You have a huge circle with Earth's orbit around the Sun. This, of course, is assuming the heliocentric position, that the Sun is in the center of the solar system. There are still a surprising number of people who are geocentrists who think the Earth is in the center. There is still a surprising argument out there, and there are some amazing points to be made for both sides. I don't have the answer. I currently am still in the heliocentric position. I think the Sun is the center, and the Earth goes around the Sun. But I've heard some good arguments for the geocentric position. It'd be a good quiz question. Geocentric means Earth center. Heliocentric means Sun center. Helio means Sun. 93 million miles from the Earth to the Sun, or from the Sun to the Earth. It'll be the same either way. It takes light 8 minutes to get that far. That's called 1 astronomical unit, abbreviated AU. The Earth is 1 astronomical unit away from the Sun. Mars is 1.5. Pluto is 39. So if you want to measure the distance from Pluto to the Sun, instead of giving it to you in miles, which would be some giant number, I could give it to you in inches, it would be an even bigger number, and it wouldn't matter. Your brain couldn't work with that. But 39 astronomical units, that'll register. Mercury is 0.36, I believe. Venus is 0.7. Earth is 1. Mars is 1.5. Jupiter is 5. Saturn is 9. I used to know them all. I had my kids memorize them for science class. Who cares? Anyway, the distance from the Sun to the Earth is 8 light minutes. So what would be the diameter of our orbit around the Sun? 16 light minutes, right? So
does it change?
it changes insignificantly. And the diameter of the Sun, even though the Sun is massive, 880,000 miles, doesn't even count. It takes about 4 seconds for light to go from one side of the Sun to the other at the speed of light. So that 4 seconds, the diameter of the Sun, would be insignificant compared to the 8 minutes. Roughly 8 minutes for the light to get here. So if the Sun blew up, disappeared. We would not know it for 8 minutes. Another phenomenon, as the Sun is going down, the Earth's atmosphere acts like a lens and bends the light. We can actually see the Sun after it's gone. Technically, it's already below the horizon, but you can still see it because it's being bent by the atmosphere. Plus, you have the 8 minutes that it took the light to get here. So the Sun's long gone by the time you see it actually disappear in reality. Probably been gone for 15 minutes. I don't know what it is, but it's some number like that. And who cares? Okay. A year, yes, sir.
Is that true in the morning then also, that you would see the light before it actually
Yes.
rises above the horizon?
Right. Well, but then it'll probably cancel each other out. Let's assume the bending of the atmosphere gives you 8 minutes advance, but it took 8 minutes to get here.
Right.
So those would cancel each other out, but at night they would add to each other.
I was going back before the flood with the firmament of ice over the earth would cause a greater refraction and lengthen the day.
The firmament actually the firmament of ice, if it was ice, would not only lengthen the day for that reason. Carl Ball's got a good book called The Panorama of Creation. He says the firmament would be fiber optic, where if a canopy of ice surrounded the earth, you shine the light on this side, the other side glows like a nightlight. So you cannot ever have total darkness.
Solid, or even as a liquid or a vapor, it would do that.
As a solid.
As a solid, it would do
Ice as a solid would be fiber optic. He's got a whole list of things that super cold ice at say 400 below zero would do. He says it becomes fiber optic. I can't verify that. I can't prove it or disprove it. He says it becomes what's he call it? A photo amplifier. You can actually see more clearly. They can see the stars better than we can. It's like having a built-in telescope all the time over you. And he said it would actually resonate when the radio waves, stars produce radio waves, when they hit the ice canopy, it would cause it to vibrate, which changes then a radio wave to a sound wave,
the song of the morning star.
and you would hear the songs of the stars, the music of the stars. The Bible talks about that. The morning stars sang together. What's that talking about?
There's biblical evidence to
Well, it sure preaches good. I can't prove any of it, okay?
Or is it angels?
Or is it angels, morning stars sang together? Yeah, good point. The angels are often called the sons of God. Yeah, I don't know. I better think on that one before I make any comments. But the canopy then would act as not only to compress the air, making it less distortion. You know, as air gets hot, it expands. If you look down the highway on a hot day, you see little lines coming off. Okay, that's the air expanding, and it's distorting the light going through it. If the air today is about 100 to 200 miles thick, if you squeezed it down to 20 miles, still wouldn't matter as far as birds fly. They never fly up 20 miles anyway, you know. Very few get up 5 miles. That's Mount Everest. But squeezing it down to 20 miles wouldn't affect anything except increasing air pressure and increasing clarity, being able to see more clearly, less distortion. Okay, a year, if you calculate it out, 365.2422 days in a year. For the Earth to go around the Sun and end up back in exactly the same spot is 365.2422. It actually goes beyond that, the fraction, but that's real close. If it was 365.25, it'd be real simple. Every 4 years, you add a day, leap year. But it's 0.2422. Well, that messes things up, okay? It works out, every 4 years you add a day, leap year, works out pretty good. But even that doesn't come out quite exactly right. So every 100 years, like the year 2000, if it normally would be a leap year, which 2000 would have been, but it's also divisible by 100, then you don't add a day. That's why there was no February 29th in the year 2000. But there was in 96, and there will be in 2004. Now, Eddie over here, whose birthday is on February 29th, only has a birthday every 4 years, and he didn't get to have one. So he's still only 12. But in real human years and people years, he's, 52 or something like that, whatever it is, 54. So, and who cares? Take 365.2422 days in a year times 24 hours in a day times 60 times 60 seconds, and you can get the number of seconds in a year. But it works out to be 525,948 minutes in a year. A little over 500,000. If that little yellow circle represented Earth's orbit around the Sun, which is 16 light minutes across, and A year has 500,000 minutes. There's a big difference between 16 and 500,000. And if you were measuring this as a trigonometry triangle, you'd really create a problem here. Put two surveyors up on the roof of this building, 16 inches apart, with their telescopes, transits. Have them focus in on a dot 525,000 inches away. That's 8¼ miles. Would you agree that forms a pretty skinny triangle? Right? Now keep in mind, this illustration is to show you what 1 light year looks like using Earth's orbit around the sun. Not the diameter of the Earth, Earth's orbit. Huge circle is nothing compared to 1 light year. See, a light year is a distance. It's not a time. And that confuses a lot of folks. A light year is not a time. It's a distance. How far does light travel in a year? About 6 trillion miles, roughly. Well, suppose it was traveling 6 trillion miles an hour. Then it goes a light year in 1 hour. Right? If I said it's 8 Hovind minutes from here to the store, that's how fast I can run. Okay, I can run there in 8 minutes. That's getting longer every year, by the way. But that's not a distance. Well, that's actually a distance. A Hovind minute is a distance. If I speeded it up, it'd be quicker, right? So a light year is the distance light can travel in 525,948 minutes, or 1 year. Earth's orbit around the sun is 16 light minutes. A year has 525,000 minutes. That makes an angle out at the point of 0.017 degrees. Get your protractor and try to mark off where 1 degree is. Then try to mark off 17 thousandths of 1 degree. I'm talking a real skinny triangle. Even if we draw a circle around this whole property and tried to mark off 1.017 degrees, at the outer circumference of a huge circle around this property, it'd still be a real small amount.
Even just 1/10 of a degree.
A tenth of a degree is not much. 100th of a degree is even less. Okay. If you want to measure the distance to a star 100 light years away, simply add 2 zeros. Now it's 0.00017 degrees. And here we got guys like Hugh Ross saying we can measure the distance to stars, 17 billion light years away. I'm sorry, I just don't believe that. I'd have to see that. How on earth can you do that? And all of this is generously assuming you know where you were 6 months ago. Isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, if we got two surveyors on the roof 16 inches apart, they can see each other. They can see each other and measure the distance between their telescopes. How do you know exactly where you were 6 months ago?
Now, do you think they really try to use that to tell a distance, or do you
Yes.
think they really do try?
What they do, first you get the distance to a close object like the moon. That can probably be done just with 2 observation points on Earth. They keep refining that distance. Then they use a phenomenon called parallax. If you hold your thumb out, let's say your thumb is 3 feet from your eyeball, and your eyes are 4 inches apart from each other, center to center. If you hold your right eye open and look past your thumb to try it, look at the side, line your thumb up with the right side of the screen, and then switch to your left eye. You see it move back and forth, right? That's called parallax. Now, if you knew the distance between your eyeballs and the distance to your thumb, you could calculate a further distance out by using that parallax. So that we calculate the distance to the moon, then let's use the moon to calculate the distance to the sun. Then let's keep doing all this and cross-checking everything. And you get, most textbooks will say you get, with parallax trigonometry, you can measure distances of less than 100 light years. I think it's probably much less than 100. Okay, but I'll give them 100. Okay, I'll give them 500 if they quit crying. The fact is you can't measure 10 billion. Even though Congress does not seem to understand, there's a difference between 100 and 10 billion. Right? A big difference. So I just don't believe people when they say you can measure a star distance, 10 billion light years away. They have other methods of trying to measure that distance, like redshift is the primary one, which we'll get into in a minute. But you just don't know those distances. Somebody says, that star is 10 billion light years away. Yeah, right. How'd you measure that? Was it a Stanley, a Lufkin, or a Craftsman tape measure? And who held the other end? That's what I want to know, right? Let me meet this guy. And who made that tape measure anyway? You just can't do that. So you cannot measure distances beyond 100 light years. Now people get upset with this and say, yes, you can. I don't believe you. Okay, if you think you can, I don't believe you. You'd have to prove it to me. I taught trigonometry. Explain it to me carefully. And I've had people give me snow jobs. When I taught school for 15 years, when you ask kids a question and they haven't done their homework and they don't know what they're talking about, they probably will give a huge, long answer to the question. It's called the snow job, right? How many know what I'm talking about? You did that yourself. Eric, you did that, I'm sure, yeah. So when a kid writes a 20-page answer to an essay question, you can rest assured he doesn't have a clue what he's talking about. He's trying to snow you, right? And a lot of these evolutionists will just flat try to snow you with their long answer. And you just got to watch for that. You just can't measure. Oh, yeah, I've done that in the debates. I say, you remind me of one of my students, Used to talk, which just to hide the fact they didn't have a clue what they're talking about. Secondly, no one knows what light is. And we don't know that it's always traveled the same speed. I mean, right now, something is hitting me and bouncing off of me, going into the camera and going out to you so your eye can pick up a vibration and translate it into a picture. What is it? And why does this show up one color and this show up a different color? What is light anyway? Give me a jar of it, paint it red, and weigh it for me. We don't know what it is. We know what it does, and we use it, obviously, but we don't know what it is, the basic fundamental thing. The idea behind a black hole is that light can be attracted by gravity. If light can be attracted by gravity, then the speed of light cannot be a constant. Right? The theory behind a black hole is very simple. In order to escape from the Earth, to take off from Earth, you have to get going about 18 or 20,000 miles an hour, or you're going to fall back. If you go less than 18 or 20,000 miles an hour, 25,000 miles an hour, you're going to go, you might go up real high, but you're going to come back down. You can't escape Earth's gravity without going that speed. Suppose Earth had stronger gravity. And you got to go faster to get away, right? The moon has much less gravity, so they had a lower escape velocity. If the moon were the same size as the Earth, and we sent a rocket up there and wanted them to come back, they'd have to bring as much fuel with them to get off there as they did to get off here. Can't do that. So the ideas of putting colonies on Mars and colonies on Venus, I think, are highly unlikely because of this problem. They're much more dense than the moon and have a much higher escape velocity. Jupiter, I forget the numbers now, like 318, rings a bell, times greater gravity on Jupiter. So if you landed on the moon, you would weigh 1/6 as much. If you landed on Jupiter, you would weigh 300 times more than you weigh right now.
Could our bodies handle that?
No. Most of your bones, like your knees, can handle, I think it's like 17 times your body weight. So when you jump off of a step ladder and land, the bounce is,
About 5 or 6 times more.
yeah, you get up to about 17 times more and something's going to break. If you throw a cat off a 10-story building, he will land on his feet, but he'll walk like a duck for a long time afterwards. They just can't, the bones can only handle a certain amount of pressure. So if you got off, even on the way into Jupiter, you couldn't have a soft landing for one thing because it'd be sucking you in so hard, you'd splat in Jupiter. And then if you could land and get out of your spacecraft, you'd lay there and couldn't even lift your hand to scratch your nose. I mean, your hand would weigh 300 times more than it weighs right now. Suppose you had so much mass in one place that the escape velocity was the speed of light. Then light can't escape. To get off the Earth, you have to go 7 miles per second.
Do they get going around the Earth?
Slingshot them out. They use the slingshot effect to get to the moon when they were going to go out to the outer planets. They would use the gravity of one planet to suck them in and just try to miss it, and slingshot out, snap the whip kind of thing. Use that planet's gravity because you don't want to bring all that fuel for that whole journey. And it whips them on out. They got to do a lot of calculating before they go.
Miss it. Oh.
Oops, splat. I'll get another rocket ready, fellas. So yeah, is that a 3 or a 4? So the theory behind black holes is that if you get enough mass in one spot, light can't escape. Problem is then you can't see it. So how do you know there's a black hole there? Oh, because it's dark. Oh, I see. That proves it. Duh, that doesn't prove a thing, okay? There might be black holes. I don't know. Nobody knows. It's a theory, a very reasonable theory. They could exist, but it is...
Suck all matter in eventually?
Within a certain distance. It'd be like a vacuum cleaner. It's much stronger as you get close to the hole, but further away you have less suction.
It wouldn't have any effect.
Right. So the speed of light may or may not be a constant. Let's take a little break. After the break, we'll finish talking about the speed of light and starlight and get into Cepheid variables and redshift right after the break. All right, so black holes are theoretical, probably real, don't know, nobody knows. How could you prove one existed? I think there's light getting sucked in over there. Okay, maybe so. Maybe there's a cloud coming across your little telescope, Flock of birds, maybe. Like one guy had said he saw planets around a star. See, nobody's ever proven the existence of planets around a star, another star besides the sun. Okay, and every night he took thousands of pictures, and he would see the star appeared to move back and forth a little bit. And he said, "Oh, see, that's the planet going around, and it's causing the star to be the gravity's pulling the star off course." Found out he had a wobble in his telescope base. Oops. There might be planets around other stars. I don't know. It doesn't matter to me. Okay, but nobody's ever proven they exist, as far as I'm concerned. Okay, in February of 1999, Houston Chronicle ran an article, page 10A, about a Danish physicist named Dr. Howe, working at Harvard, was able to slow light down by cooling it. They cooled it to 50 billionths of a degree above absolute zero.
Can I really measure that exactly?
I don't know. Pretty chilly. Don't lick it.
Isn't that temperature out in the universe, out in space?
Out in space is real close to that. It's about 3 degrees above that is what they think, negative 456. This is Fahrenheit. If you do it in Kelvin, it'd be 0. If you do it in centigrade, it's negative 273. But they slowed light down. When they got it that cold, light slowed down to 38 miles an hour. Then in February, a couple of months later, February 2000, a year later, they slowed it down to 1 mile an hour. Then in January of 2001, they stopped it. NewYorkTimes.com had an article, researchers say they have slowed light down to a dead stop.
What's it look like when it's stopped?
I don't know. They stored it and then released it as if it were an ordinary material particle. The achievement is a landmark feat that by reining in nature's swiftest and most ethereal form of energy for the first time could help realize what are now theoretical concepts for vastly increasing the speed of computers. Right now, the speed of computers, of course, is dependent on the speed of light. If the electricity can only go through there at 186,000 miles a second, what if it went through instantly? Gigahertz would be a snail, right? Another thing to consider, People say, boy, if I could travel at the speed of light, I'd go visit all the stars. Yeah, right. You'd be an old man by the time you got to the first one. Right? What if you could travel at the speed of thought? All you have to do is think about being there. Of course, with some people, that'd be even slower. Right? So I had some students, they'd die if they did that. See, when we pray to God, how long does it take our prayers to get to heaven? Apparently faster than the speed of light. And when God answers our prayers, or when angels go back and forth, or in the book of Daniel, when the angel was coming down to answer Daniel's prayer, he said, as soon as you started praying, God sent me. Which leaves us, in our way of thinking, everything is three-dimensional. So heaven is out there someplace, okay? What if heaven is in a different dimension and it's right next to us, a half a second in the future?
It's always a half a second.
Or, a millionth of a second or something, What if there are other dimensions we have no concept of? Don't have a clue.
If I get a time machine, I can just go a thousandth of a second faster.
And be there, yeah. Could be. Anyway, these are things your brain, thinks on for a while and gives up because human brain won't wrap around that. Two independent teams of physicists have achieved the result. One led by the same Dr. Howe of Harvard and Roland Institute for Science in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The other by Dr. Ronald Walsworth and a couple other guys whose names I cannot pronounce. Anyway, that Smithsonian and Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics in Cambridge. So these guys were slowing light down by cooling it and got down to actually stopping light altogether. In June of 2000, the Sunday Times in United Kingdom announced, scientists claim they have broken the ultimate speed barrier, the speed of light. In research carried out in the United States, particle physicists have shown that light pulses can be accelerated up to 300 times their normal velocity. Dr. Li Jun Wang of University and Research Institute in Princeton transmitted a pulse of light toward a chamber filled with specially treated cesium gas, and the light went through faster than light, 300 times faster. So the obvious question comes up, is the speed of light a constant? All of the arguments about the universe being billions of years old because the stars are so far away, all of those arguments are based on the assumption the speed of light is a constant. Daniel, you asked the question before the break, or just right during the break. What was it about the starlight? Oh, are all the stars within a 6,000 light year radius, I guess? No. No question. There's so many stars. There's trillions of stars and trillions of galaxies. They're a long ways away. Much farther than 6,000 light years, for sure. But that doesn't mean the universe is more than 6,000 years old, if the speed of light has not been a constant through time. Matter of fact, Barry Setterfield has an article here in Atomic Constants, Light and Time magazine. During the last 300 years, he said, at least 164 separate measurements of the speed of light have been published. 16 different measurement techniques were used. The different ways to measure the speed of light. One way, if you know the distance to the moon, and the moon is moving across the sky in front of a star, you focus on that star carefully, and as soon as the moon goes past, how long does it take the light to get to you? Now you have a 243 million mile distance, and get a quick stopwatch and calculate the speed of light. There's 16 different ways that it's been measured. The way we did it in physics class when I was in school, you get mirrors, a bunch of mirrors arranged in a circle like those disco balls, whatever they call them, okay? You shine a laser all the way down the hall, bounce it off a mirror, bounce it back to another mirror, this disco ball, and bounce it back down the hall to a white piece of paper. And the length the light travels in is 3 trips down the hallway. Get your disco ball spinning on a record player. 33 RPM or 78 RPM or something. The light's going to bounce off that mirror, and once you get to a certain speed, you're going to see the light on the final leg on the piece of paper start to move. And now you can calculate how far did the light travel from the time it left the laser, bounced off the mirror, came back, bounced off this mirror, the mirror moved a little bit. Enough that even at the speed of light, you're able now to tell. If the little calculations, you can look up in a physics book how that's done, but it's not that complicated to measure the speed of light. Several of the methods are very, very simple. Setterfield says it's been measured for 164 separate times over 300 years. He said the speed of light has decreased so rapidly that experimental error cannot explain it. Here's the chart that Barry Setterfield got. Measurements back from 1860, clear up until the present. Now there's a margin of error. You see the lines on there? Different people measured the speed of light, and they would say the speed of light is X amount plus or minus so much. What he has graphed here is his the average of the light speeds that have been measured over the last 300 years, or since 1860, over the last 140 years. He said the speed of light decreased until about 1960. And the speed of light today, if you measure it, you always get the same, 186,000 miles per second. So why did it level out in 1960? Well, probably because that's when they invented the atomic clock. And I'll explain why. Everybody else is getting a greater number for the speed of light. Not much greater, a little bit, okay? You won't notice a difference when you shut the lights off to get to bed, okay? It's still real quick. But if the speed of light is decreasing until 1960, what made it level out? Let's assume that it has decreased. This article says, no physical law prevents anything from exceeding the speed of light. In 2 published experiments, the speed of light was apparently exceeded by as much as a factor of 100. This is clear back in 1988. They were getting measurements 100 times faster than the speed of light. So you can't say the speed of light has always been a constant. The atomic clock measures time based on the wavelength of a cesium atom. Let's see, the paragraph where it starts off, as a result, they defined the second of atomic time as the length of time required for 192,631,770 cycles of a cesium atom at 0 magnetic field. You're measuring the wavelength of a cesium atom and determining, okay, this is 1 second. Well, duh, if you're measuring time, if you're measuring light with light, you're not going to notice any decrease because your clock is decreasing at the same rate, right? So you have a rubber ruler.
If our clock is decreasing, does that mean time itself to us is decreasing? Or just, is it so insignificant we're not going to notice it in our lifetime?
We won't notice it in our lifetime or in a bunch of people's lifetimes. The article that Walt Brown has in his book is really good about atomic clocks. He said atomic clocks are very precise, but that does not mean they're accurate. He goes to great detail the difference between precision and accuracy. Read that when you get time. Dr. Troitsky said the speed of light was 10 billion times faster at time 0. Now, what does he mean by that? Well, according to the Big Bang theory, the Big Bang took place, everything took off faster than the speed of light. Otherwise, it wouldn't be here yet. So things were going faster than the speed of light initially. They have to believe that in order to get the universe to put together. See, and Hugh Ross has swallowed all of this and doesn't see the problem. Everything is based on the assumption that the speed of light has always been the same. Dr. Joao Magueggio, whoever he is, said, a shocking possibility is that the speed of light might change in time during the life of the universe. So I don't think we could prove the speed of light has always been the same. We certainly cannot measure the great distances to the stars. They probably are billions of light years away, but we don't know that. We can't measure it. Okay. And thirdly, the creation was finished. It was mature. When God made it and He was done, they could already see the stars. Even if they're billions of light years away, they could already see them. I often ask people, how old was Adam when God made him? He was 0. Did he look 0? No. He looked 48, prime of life. And so, if you walked into the Garden of Eden, the day after God made it, you'd see all these beautiful trees, all the fruit on them. Wow, how old are these trees? 0. Did they have rings? Yes. I don't know. Rings add strength to the tree, called the laminate effect. You have hard ring, soft ring, hard ring, soft ring. Otherwise, the tree, all hard rings, it's real brittle, it breaks. All soft rings, it, like Jell-O, can't stand up. So the combination of the two gives you both strength and flexibility, which is why God sometimes puts us through hard times and good times and hard times and good times, and that adds those layers to your life, and you get both strength and flexibility. So God did not make 2 babies and put them in the Garden of Eden and hand them a package of seeds and say, here, plant these quick, you're going to need supper. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? The chicken. Which came first, the tree or the plant, or the tree or the seed? The tree, okay? God made a mature creation. So, things to consider, last 2. The creation was finished when God made it. That would include starlight being already showing on the earth. And a light year is a distance, it is not a time. Many people have a hard time grasping that concept. Since the speed of light is not proven to be consistent, why would star distance have anything to do with the age of the universe? Just because a star is 10 billion light years away, so does that prove the universe is 10 billion years old? No. Probably is 10 billion light years away. Okay, another way they measure star distance is by using what's called the red shift, or measuring with a Cepheid variable. And we'll get into all that here. When light goes through a prism, it breaks it up into the colors: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet. Roy G. Biv, you learned that in school, right? How to memorize the colors. If starlight is traveling a great distance, or if the star is moving away from us, you should have what's called a red shift. Here's basically how it works. If a train is moving toward you, it compresses the sound waves and you hear a higher pitch. As it goes past you, the sound waves are stretched out or refracted and you get a lower pitch. So the train will go as it goes by. That's called the Doppler effect, named after some guy named Doppler who discovered this. You can get the same thing with a whistle on a string, swing it over your head. A person out in the audience will hear, as it comes toward them, a higher pitch and a lower pitch as it goes on this side. It'll be woo, woo, woo. That's how sirens will work. They use that Doppler effect on a siren. As it spins around, they get a different sound. A change in pitch. And if you want to really get fancy, you could probably get musical notes. The pitch would be just right by spinning it at a certain speed. Or you could play, B flat and C sharp or something if you want. So the train is using sound waves, and we know the Doppler effect works with that. The assumption is maybe the Doppler effect works with light. So if a star is coming toward us, it'll compress the light waves. If it's going away from us, it'll stretch them out, causing a red shift. So they say if a star is moving away, the light should be shifted toward the red end of the spectrum. Sounds good, possibly true. Nobody knows for sure what's causing the red shift. Jeffrey Burbridge and Adelaide Hewitt said in an article, A Catalog of Quasars Near and Far, Sky and Telescope magazine, 94, they said there was an early sign that redshifts reliably indicate the distance. Keep that in mind. They thought, wow, look how far that's redshifted. That proves it's X number zillion miles away. The distances of galaxies. For QSOs, abbreviated quasars, quasi-stellar object called a quasar. However, the diagram shows a wide scatter in apparent brightness at every redshift. In fact, there is little correlation of brightness to redshift at all. Either quasars come in an extremely wide range of intrinsic luminosities, that means their brightness. Maybe quasars are a lot different brightness. Maybe one quasar is real bright, one's real dim, as most people believe, or their redshifts do not indicate distance. Here's a guy admitting we don't know that redshift indicates the distance to the stars. Maybe it does, or maybe it doesn't. They go on to say, thus, for us, the only conclusion that can be drawn is that at least some quasars are relatively nearby, and that a large fraction of their redshift is due to something other than the expansion of the universe. When the redshift was discovered, they look at stars and see the red is shifted over. They say, wow, that star is moving away. Maybe so. We don't know. See one over here. Whew, that's moving away. Wow. If everywhere you look, the stars are moving away, you come to the conclusion, well, that means they must have all been together. And there was a big bang. Because after all, they're all moving away. Well, don't you see what an assumption you have here? First, you're assuming the redshift means they're moving away, which we don't know. Are there other things that might cause this? I think there is, and we'll get to that in a second. In Science News 95, September 9th, they said, another set of observations indicates that the universe appears to be 4.8 to 10.6 billion years old. Now, wait a minute. I've got textbooks that say it's 20 billion years old. How do you revise it down to 8.4? I said 4.6, 8.4 billion. Well, to calculate the age of the universe, they've got an equation which includes what's called the Hubble constant, named after the guy named Hubble. That the telescope is also named after the Hubble Space Telescope. The new work relied on the Hubble Space Telescope to obtain distance to faraway galaxies. A team led by Neil Tanver of University of Cambridge in England used a two-step method to estimate the Hubble constant. First, they observed a type of standard candle known as Cepheid variables to find the distance to the spiral galaxy M96. You have to be careful about drawing conclusions because of the Hubble constant. Measurements have huge systematic errors. Suppose I was going to calculate the population of the Earth in 100 years. And I say, well, the population grows by 8% every year, and I do that times for 100 years. Isn't my answer I come up with dependent on the numbers I put into that equation? That 8% determines everything about the outcome of the answer, doesn't it? Suppose I found out, oops, it's really only 2%. Greatly modifies your number. What if, oops, it's only 0.5%? The Hubble constant is one of the multipliers in the equation.
It is not really a constant.
It's not a constant. All you got to do is change that number a little bit, and all of a sudden the universe is no longer 20 billion years old. Now it's only 8.4. Hubble constant is a far cry from a constant. Even the nearest Cepheids are so remote, it's difficult to determine their absolute distance with any great accuracy, this guy says. All large distances in astronomical literature are subject to an error of perhaps 10% from this cause alone. 10% error is a pretty big amount. We know that faintness, now here's what they do. They look at a star and say, wow, that one's bright. Must be close. That one's dim. Must be far away. Error in logic right there. It's called faintness. How bright is the star? The faintness arises from two causes: distance and absorbing matter. There's a cloud in the way. Something's absorbing the light. I could shine a bright spotlight through something that would make it look very dim to you, and it'll only be 5 feet away. And you would say, wow, it's pretty dim, must be millions of miles away. No, there's something absorbing the light in between. He said it's not generally possible to apportion the accuracy accurately between the two. The Bible says God stretched out the heavens. He stretches them out. Several different references in the Bible talk about God stretching out the heavens. Maybe that is what is causing the red shift, the stretching of the heavens. So let's close here. What's causing the red shift? Nobody knows. A couple of theories. One is the heavens are stretched out. If God created everything from here and stretched it out, the star is moving, and we would see a red shift in the light. Not because it's billions of years old, but because God stretched it out. Okay? Could be the light's getting tired. Everything else gets tired when it travels a long ways. I do. Right? Maybe the light is getting tired while you get a red shift. Maybe it's just the effects of traveling great distance. Maybe it's the Doppler effect. Maybe the star is moving away. It's a very reasonable possibility, but not the only possibility. Maybe light is being slowed down or speeded up by gravity. If black holes are real, suppose a star is sending its light to the Earth and it's going near a black hole, but not going to hit it. It'll be slingshotted right by. It'll be speeded up on the way in, then sent onto the Earth. So you can't say, we know the universe is billions of years old because the star is a billion light years away. You just can't do that. You have too many assumptions built into your equation. When you get into the stars, you know, do they tell a story? Is there a gospel message in the stars? Hank Hanegraaff has blasted me 3 times on his radio program without ever giving me a chance to respond. The Bible Answer Man. He says, Hovind believes in the gospel in the stars. I don't know if I believe in it or not. Okay, it's just an interesting theory, and I think it's worth study. D. James Kennedy has a great book out called The Real Meaning of the Zodiac. He says there are 88 constellations, and several of them mentioned in the Bible. In Job 38 talks about Pleiades and Orion. Job 38:32 talks about Mazzaroth and Arcturus. These are constellations in the sky. Now when I look up at the sky, I see a bunch of stars. I don't see a bear. I don't see a lion. I don't see Draco the dragon. It looks to me like a bunch of stars. Anybody else see the same thing when you look up there? Okay. But apparently, in the old days, they sat around watching the sheep and didn't have that much else to do and said, you know, that looks kind of like a bear up there, you know. There's his tail. You see his, oh yeah, I see his tail. Okay, see, that's a bear. Who made this up? Nobody knows. Several theories are. One is it's purely heathen and nothing to it. Another theory is that God told Adam the whole gospel story and put it in the stars. Virgo the virgin is going to bring forth a son. Later we have Libra, the balances. He's going to be the judge. You know, the zodiac symbols. Then Gemini, twins, Cancer. You go through the whole zodiac thing. Now, of course, today, that's all perverted into the horoscope, which is a bunch of baloney. One time, I think it was the New York Times or somebody forgot to print the horoscope in their newspaper, major newspaper in New York. Every morning, the horoscope's in there, you know, tells you what kind of good day you're going to have, like a Chinese fortune cookie. All right? 1 million people refused to go to work because they couldn't read the horoscope to find out if they're going to have a good day or not. We got a word for that down here in Florida. It's called stupid. Okay? Those New Yorkers that didn't go to work need some help. The stars do not have any influence over what's going on. Except if you lay out too late watching them, you won't be able to get up in the morning and go to work because you didn't get enough sleep. So these are these constellations. The 12 zodiac symbols has other minor constellations associated with it. There's 88 total. And D. James Kennedy's book and many other books have been written claiming that this is actually telling us a story. The gospel story. That could be, I don't know. I think if you want to study it, great, enjoy yourself. But Hank, don't accuse me of teaching that dogmatically because I don't. Okay, I don't know the truth on that, and I'd like to get on and defend myself on your program sometime if you want to be fair about it. Virgo the Virgin is one of the star clusters. Leo the Lion is another one. Some people have said the Sphinx might be put there, might have been put there to tell us how to read the zodiac symbols. You start with Virgo the Virgin, the face of a woman and it's got the body of a lion on the Sphinx by the Great Pyramid. Interesting study. Okay, next week, take up some more questions, then we'll hopefully get into, be able to finish all the questions and answers over the next few lessons, so we can finish after 104, and we'll get into carbon dating. How does that work? Try to get into that next week. Thank you so much.